is most predominantly used for hypoxemic respiratory failure. So for oxygen problems.
Bless you.
So, CHF, maybe even like a pneumonia patient who's not doing well. It's being used a lot before we actually go to BiPAP or CPAP now. So it's kind of being like the bridge because it's actually very effective. And it's cheaper. It's cheaper. You have less equipment. They can eat with it. Yeah, so let's talk about what's the advantages of it. It's more comfortable, right? It's less labor, which is a factor, but it's, you know, just one. People can eat. What was it?
Safer, less chance of aspiration.
Yep. Now, if my patient aspirated, it would be some other reason, because you're not going to aspirate while on a high flow nasal cannula. Less risk of pressure sores. Anybody think of anything else?
Person with eating coffee.
Yeah, I have eating. Yeah, they can. I would just say overall, your patient would likely be more compliant with it too, right? Because of all those reasons. Higher compliance leads to higher compliance. Because they don't have to have that mask on their face. So they've also shown that it's working well with mild to moderate hypercapnic respiratory failure. So your COPD patient. Which I wouldn't have believed until I actually read the studies that showed it. Because to me, it seems like it should be all oxygenation, but they've really found that it works very well with COPD patients too. Yes?
Is that because they can get the oxygen through their nose and then slowly breathe out their mouth? Is that how it would work for the hypercapnic?
No, when you put someone on a high flow nasal cannula, it washes out all the dead space and the excess CO2, so it actually brings their CO2 down quite nicely by washing out all the excess CO2. So, oh, I know. Another advantage is we're able to deliver high flows with lower FiO2s. Which is why it makes it really valuable in like a COPD patient. You're talking about air hungry people. COPDers, they want that air. And just like a PEP or pursed lip breathing, any kind of positive pressure is gonna help with the back pressure on those, the airways that like to collapse on exhalation. So it also helps stint the airways open so patients can exhale better. It's the same concept of why pursed lip breathing works. So pursed lip breathing, we can do to the same advantage with like PEP therapy, high flow nasal cannula, CPAP therapy, anything that adds back pressure is gonna mimic the effect of pursed lip breathing, which helps with air trapping and letting patients exhale better. So there's no magic scenario, you guys, to tell you what's right for your patient. You kind of have to evaluate. I will tell you that this is being used a lot as the bridge. Nasal cannula is not working, so let's try them on a high flow nasal cannula. Does that make sense to you guys? So, and then at that point, if you're still having issues and your patient's still desaturating or they have increased work of breathing, then we can switch to BiPAP. So the next step here would be BiPAP, which I'll have to erase the board. And I think the best thing that we'll do, that will help, is we'll come up with some scenarios that give different options in different types of situations, so you can help decide what's the most effective. If you put your patient on a high flow nasal cannula and 15-20 minutes later they still have increased work of breathing, they're not saturating well, their ABGs are getting worse, they're using their accessory muscles, you can see that they're not physically getting better from a work of breathing standpoint, we need to go to BiPAP. But if you put them on a high flow nasal cannula and they respond very well, well, maybe we don't need to go to BiPAP. We can just kind of hang out there. And vice versa, if you can't get a patient off straight from BiPAP to a nasal cannula, a lot of times you can get them from this to this. So it's going to work both ways. We're going to use it as a step up, and we can also use it as a step down. So we got them off the vent, but now they're on BiPAP. They've been able to tolerate BiPAP, but we can't get them to nasal cannula, so we put them on a high flow. And then take them from the high flow and gradually take them down to the nasal cannula. There's also home units now for high flow nasal cannula. So, and they're being used with a lot of COPDers. So it might be that they have to go home with it. Jeremy.
So, if you're nasal cannula, but you see those numbers on there, and you just gotta skip high flow and go straight to BiPAP.
What
CPAP,
numbers?
Whatever.
On the bottom.
On the bottom. Like, where's the?
The 7.3.
When are you gonna skip high flow?
I'm gonna have to give you some scenarios. I don't know that I could just give you a random answer off the top of my head.
Okay.
Because realistically, I might see high flow nasal cannula as an option here instead of CPAP. Sometimes it depends, like from a test perspective, what are your options? So what's there? If high flow nasal cannula is there and CPAP's not, then it's high flow nasal cannula. If CPAP's there, then CPAP's the answer. In the real world, I would think I could try this patient on a high flow nasal cannula and see how they did. Generally in the ER, we tend to just kind of put everybody on BiPAP. I don't know how much high flow nasal cannula is being used in the ER yet. I'm seeing it a lot on the floors. I don't know, Sharon, if you have anything to add on that.
And it wasn't really used a lot in the ER.
Yeah.
Still down there, but it was just a lot of BiPAP because it was just easier to put them on and turn them. And sometimes